Marine fossils on Mount Everest prove the world's highest peak was once an ancient ocean floor. Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, holds a surprising secret hidden within its rocks. Near its summit, scientists and climbers have discovered marine fossils, remains of ancient sea creatures that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. These fossils reveal an astonishing fact. The top of the world was once part of an ancient ocean floor. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
I want you to close your eyes for just a second, if you can, and put yourself in a very specific scenario.
Always a dangerous request.
Right, but trust me on this one. You are standing at the absolute highest point on planet Earth. The ambient temperature is hovering around negative 40 degrees. You are surrounded by nothing but blindy white snow, jagged peaks, and just hurricane-force winds screaming through the death zone.
It's a brutal environment.
It really is. You're shivering. You are relying on a heavy oxygen mask just to keep your brain functioning.
Barely functioning.
Yeah, barely functioning. And you are looking down at a rock in your heavily gloved hand. And in that isolated frozen moment, you realize you are holding a piece of the bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you are here with us. Today we are exploring some truly staggering insights from an article called Summit of the Sea, Everest's Ancient Marine Secrets, along with our surrounding research.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a reality that sounds like, well, absolute science fiction, but is a concrete, undeniable geological fact. Mount Everest, the roof of the world, was once a thriving, ancient ocean floor.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around.
We are going to figure out the sheer mechanical physics of how planetary forces managed to push delicate sea creatures thousands of feet into the stratosphere.
It is such a profound image to start with, and I am so glad we are exploring this with you today. We tend to walk around in our daily lives viewing mountains as these permanent, incredibly static fixtures.
Right, like they've just always been there.
Exactly. They are our ultimate cultural symbols of something unmovable and eternal.
Yeah.
But the reality we're diving into today is going to fundamentally change how you view the solid ground beneath your feet.
I know it did for me.
We are going to take a journey that spans hundreds of millions of years, exploring not just what happened, but the violent dynamic processes that make it possible. By the end of this, the way you look at a mountain range will never be the same.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core facts of this discovery are just astonishing, and they really force you to reconsider what a mountain even is. Climbers and geologists, people braving the most extreme, hostile conditions on the planet, have found actual marine fossils embedded in the rock strata more than 8,000 meters above sea level.
Just think about that altitude.
Right. That is cruising altitude for a commercial airliner.
Yeah, you're practically in the stratosphere.
And they aren't just finding a couple of ambiguous, chalky smudges in the stone. They are finding highly specific, identifiable remains of ancient marine biology.
Real creatures.
Exactly. For instance, they are finding trilobites. If you aren't familiar, picture a prehistoric, heavily armored horseshoe crab scuttling across the seafloor.
A classic ancient marine animal.
Right. They're also finding crinoids, which look incredibly delicate, almost like underwater lilies with long, elegant stems, but they're actually animals closely related to modern sea stars and sea urchins.
Which is mind-blowing.
And alongside them, brachiopods, which are these ribbed, shellfish-like filter feeders. We are talking about organisms whose entire evolutionary existence relied on being completely submerged in seawater.
And if you put yourself in the boots of the early climbers who first started noticing these formations, the cognitive dissonance must have been overwhelming.
I can't even imagine.
You are starting for oxygen, your brain is already prone to playing tricks on you at that altitude, and you look at the rock face and see a perfectly preserved sea lily.
You'd think you're going crazy.
You would be entirely forgiven for thinking you were experiencing a severe altitude-induced hallucination. But the reality of their existence up there brings us to a really fascinating technical problem.
And how they survived the trip.
Exactly. How do these incredibly fragile biological structures survive? We are talking about continental collisions that thrust millions of tons of rock into the sky. Usually, that level of geological violence pulverizes everything in its path.
Right, I was trying to wrap my head around the physics of that. If you take a delicate seashell and subject it to the forces required to build a mountain, it should just turn to dust.
It absolutely should.
It seems like the rock itself must have acted as some sort of protective casing.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. It all comes down to the rock matrix, specifically marine limestone.
Okay.
When these creatures died, they didn't just fall into a chaotic, churning environment. They settled onto a quiet, stable ocean floor and were slowly buried by incredibly fine calcium carbonate mud and sediment.
So like a soft blanket of mud.
Precisely. And over time, that sediment underwent a process called lithification. The sheer hydrostatic pressure of the ocean water above, combined with the accumulating weight of the sediment itself, literally squeezed the water out of the mud.
Wow.
It chemically bonded the minerals around the shells, turning that loose seafloor muck into dense, solid limestone. So by the time the tectonic violence started, these fossils were no longer loose shells.
We were locked in.
They were encased in a solid block of rock, cushioned the fossils, locking them in a natural time capsule that absorbed the brunt of the tectonic forces.
And the fact that those time capsules survived all the way to the summit is a geological miracle. Because finding marine fossils at 8,000 meters isn't just a matter of looking for them. It requires a bizarre alignment of circumstances.
It really does.
When rock gets pushed up into the death zone, the atmosphere usually wreaks havoc on it. You have extreme freeze-thaw cycles, relentless glacial carving, and winds that act like sandpaper.
The elements are brutal up there.
Right. All of those weathering forces usually obliterate any fragile fossil evidence over millions of years. But the specific band of limestone near the summit of Everest, often referred to by climbers as the yellow band, managed to retain these fossils remarkably well.
It's one of those lucky breaks in nature.
I really want you to visualize this. Imagine holding a fossilized relative of a sea urchin, a creature biologically engineered for the buoyancy and pressure of ocean water, while you are standing on a frozen peak at 29,000 feet.
It is the ultimate geological paradox.
It really is.
It is a paradox that forces us to completely reframe our concept of time. We cannot understand how a sea star ends up on Everest if we only think in terms of human history.
No, human history is a blink of an eye.
Exactly. We have to look through the lens of deep time. We are looking at fossils that date back roughly 450 to 500 million years.
That number is just, I can barely process that.
It is genuinely difficult for the human brain to process. 500 million years ago. This is long before the first dinosaur ever walked the Earth, long before trees existed, and long before the continents as we know them had taken their current shapes.
Which brings us to the before picture. Because 450 million years ago, the region we now call the Himalayas wasn't just a flat plain or a shallow valley.
Not at all.
The entire area was completely submerged under a massive body of water known as the Tethys Ocean. Geographically, this prehistoric sea sat right between the ancient land masses of what would eventually become India and Eurasia.
What's fascinating here is understanding what kind of ocean the Tethys was. It wasn't a barren, freezing, high-pressure trench.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a vast expanse of warm, shallow, sunlit waters. It was essentially a massive incubator for marine biodiversity.
So totally different from the Everest we see today.
Completely different. You had trillions upon trillions of organisms thriving in this environment over millions of years. They lived, they built their calcium-rich shells, and they died, constantly raining down onto the ocean floor.
Just a continuous cycle.
Exactly. The sheer volume of organic and mineral material accumulating down there was staggering. It formed layers of sediment thousands of feet thick. So the essential takeaway for you is that the summit pyramid of Mount Everest, the very rock that climbers clip their carabiners into when they reach the top of the world, is not just rock.
It's an ecosystem.
Yes. It is literally the compacted, fossilized remains of an ancient warm-water marine ecosystem.
So we have this massive, vibrant ocean sitting between India and Eurasia. And that brings us to the obvious monumental question.
How do we get from point A to point B?
Exactly. So how does an ocean floor climb to 29,031 feet? How do you take millions of years of compacted seashells sitting happily at the bottom of a tropical sea and thrust them into the freezing stratosphere to create this peak?
The answer requires us to look at plate tectonics, but we need to look past the basic idea of continents just slowly drifting around. We have to look at the specific, extreme mechanics of what happened here.
The crash.
The massive crash. Fast forward from the ancient days of the Tethys Ocean to about 60 million years ago. The Indian tectonic plate, which had broken off from a supercontinent much further south, began moving northward on a collision course with the Eurasian plate.
Okay.
And in geological terms, India was moving at an absolute sprint, up to 15 centimeters a year, which is incredibly fast for a landmass of that size.
I'm trying to picture the physics of that impact. Because usually when we think of tectonic plates colliding, we think of the Pacific Ring of Fire. where you have a dense oceanic plate hitting a continental plate, and the oceanic plate gets shoved downward into the Earth's mantle to melt.
Right, a process of subduction.
But India and Eurasia are both massive, buoyant continental plates. Neither one of them is dense enough to be forced down into the mantle, right? They're basically acting like two giant geological bulldozers crashing head-on.
That is the exact distinction that makes the Himalayas possible. You've hit on the difference between an oceanic continental subduction and a continental convergence.
Okay.
Because both the Indian and Eurasian plates are made of thick, buoyant continental crust, neither plate could subduct, and neither wanted to sink.
So where does the energy go?
The kinetic energy of this massive, slow-motion collision had nowhere to go but up. The ancient seabed of the Tethys Ocean, which was caught right in the middle of this planetary vice grip, didn't slide into the mantle. It was violently buckled, folded over on itself, and thrust skyward.
It's like taking a thick rug on a hardwood floor and pushing it from both ends. The middle just bows upward.
That's a great analogy.
But we are talking about a rug made of solid limestone, thousands of miles wide, being pushed with enough force to literally double the thickness of the Earth's crust in that region.
And that doubling of the crust is what birthed the entire Himalayan mountain range. Former ocean floor rocks, heavily laden with those trilobite and crinoid fossils, were hoisted thousands and thousands of meters into the air.
It's just hard to fathom.
The rock layers were shoved over one another in massive thrust faults. And the ultimate pinnacle of this tectonic pileup, the absolute highest point where that Tethys seabed was pushed, is Mount Everest.
The crown jewel.
A crown jewel. Through this agonizingly slow but unfathomably powerful continental collision, a warm, shallow sea was transformed into a frozen peak standing at 8,848.86 meters above sea level.
It is genuinely hard to comprehend that kind of transformation. Over 8,800 meters high, built from the floor of an ocean. But one of the most compelling parts of this entire narrative is that the story didn't end millions of years ago.
Not at all.
You might intuitively think, okay, the collision happened, the crust buckled, mountain was built, and now it just sits there. But this is an active, ongoing process. Mount Everest is very much a mountain still in motion today.
It absolutely is, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it serves as a powerful reminder of how dynamic our planet remains.
Right.
The Indian plate didn't just crash into the Eurasian plate and suddenly run out of gas. The underlying mantle currents are still driving it northward today. It is continuously pressing against the Eurasian plate as we speak.
So the crash is still happening.
Exactly. Because of this relentless ongoing pressure, the Himalayas are still actively rising. They are being pushed upward by several millimeters every single year.
Wait, so if the mountain is growing by several millimeters a year, and it's been doing that for tens of millions of years, the math suggests it should be practically out in space by now. It should be much, much taller. What is stopping Everest from just growing infinitely upward?
That is the crucial counterforce at play here. Geology is a two-way street. While the tectonic forces deep beneath the crust are continuously pushing the mountain up, the atmosphere is violently tearing it down.
The weather.
Yeah. You have an intense real-time battle happening right on the slopes of Everest between creation and destruction. The extreme weather we discussed earlier isn't just an obstacle for human climbers. It is a relentless geological buzzsaw.
Because at that altitude, you're dealing with a jet stream, right? You have winds that can reach hurricane speeds, blasting ice crystals against the rock face day in and day out.
Yes, the wind is a major factor, but you also have profound glacial erosion and a process called frost wedging.
How does that work?
Well, water from melting snow seeps into the microscopic cracks in the limestone during the day. When the temperature plummets at night, that water freezes and expands, literally prying the rock apart from the inside out.
Oh, wow.
And then glaciers act like massive rivers of sandpaper, grinding away the sides of the mountain as they slowly flow downward. So the height of Mount Everest that we measured today, that 8,848.86 meters, is not a permanent number.
It's temporary.
It is just a momentary snapshot of a planetary tug of war. It is the current equilibrium point between tectonic uplift trying to build the mountain and atmospheric erosion trying to erase it.
It makes you look at every ridge and every rockfall completely differently, knowing that the weather is actively dismantling what the tectonic plates are laboring to build.
It's poetry in a way.
It is, and there's an incredible irony in that too, because those fossils, those delicate time capsules of the Tethys Ocean, are only visible to us because of that destruction.
That's right.
The very wind and ice that are slowly eroding the limestone away are what expose the fossils for climbers to see, right before those same forces eventually grind the fossils into dust. It is this beautifully violent, completely necessary cycle.
It is a profound cycle, and it highlights exactly why these discoveries are so crucial for our broader understanding of the Earth. These fossils offer us an unparalleled window into the planet's deep past.
They really do.
They give us one of the clearest, most tangible examples of just how malleable the Earth's surface really is. Finding a marine fossil at the top of the world strips away the illusion of permanence.
Completely.
It is a stark physical reminder that continents are constantly drifting and colliding, that entire oceans can completely disappear from the map, and that towering mountains are born from the depths of the sea.
What a phenomenal journey we've taken today. Just to recap the sheer scale of what we've covered for you, we set out to understand how delicate sea creatures ended up resting in the clouds.
Pretty wild premise.
And that question took us on a timeline spanning 500 million years. We traveled from the warm, shallow, biologically rich waters of the ancient Tethys Ocean through the slow-motion, world-altering collision of the Indian and Eurasian continental plates.
The ultimate bulldozer crash.
Yes, and we arrived at the freezing, windswept, 8,848.86-meter peak of modern-day Mount Everest. We've learned about the immense pressure of lithification, the mechanics of continental buoyancy, and the ongoing war between tectonic uplift and glacial erosion.
It's an active battlefield.
Ultimately, we discovered that the highest point on our planet is quite literally a limestone monument to a lost ocean.
It truly is a monument to deep time. And as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that takes the mechanics we've discussed today and projects them into the unknown future.
Okay, I love this.
We know now that the highest peak on Earth today contains the ancient fossilized remnants of a long-lost ocean. So think about the vast, mysterious oceans that cover our planet right now.
Like the Pacific or Atlantic.
Exactly. Think about the Mariana Trench, or the coral reefs of the Pacific, or the deep abyssal plains of the Atlantic. What incredible, modern underwater worlds, currently sitting quietly at the bottom of the sea, might one day be caught in the vice grip of a future tectonic collision.
Oh, wow.
Millions of years from now, when human history is a distant memory, what pieces of our current ocean floor will be thrust up into the stratosphere to form the unimaginable mountain peaks of an entirely new world?
That is such a spectacular thought to leave on. Just imagining a future explorer millions of years from now, standing on a new, unrecognizable continent, finding a fossilized remnant of a modern coral reef at 30,000 feet. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you'll look at the ground beneath your feet and the mountains in the distance with a much deeper sense of wonder today. And as always, keep questioning the incredible world around you.
Okay, one question for you. How were marine fossils of ancient sea creatures discovered near the summit of Mount Everest? And what do these remarkable findings reveal about the mountain's origin as an ancient ocean floor? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.